Hello fellow soul, Philip coming to you with a spiritual revolution, the revolution in learning and your own self-education. Now today I'm going to address what I think is one of the most important questions you or anybody can ask yourself, and I'm going to answer it for you. But first, when I ask the question, I challenge you to pause the video after you've heard the question and just to jot down your own answer. And you could do two answers if you like. You could do your instinctive, immediate reaction answer, and then once you've written that down, you might spend a minute or two reflecting upon your answer and seeing if you want to change it in any way. So here goes. The question: what is learning? So I'll give you a chance to pause the video, and whether you pause it or not, whether you continue listening or you have just come back, let me answer the question. So firstly, learning as a skill. Most adults, if not all adults, associate learning not as being a skill, as a process, but rather with the object of the learning, the knowledge to be learned, the information to be discovered, the idea to be, to be listened to, and so on. And that's because of our schooling. Our schooling emphatically never taught you or me, probably 99% of children, how to learn. The focus was always on the getting of knowledge, the transfer of knowledge. The knowledge came from the expert, which was the teacher, and the knowledge was received by the child, who was the apprentice, if you like, the student. And often we didn't like this knowledge, or it was boring or whatever, but we would be compelled to learn it on point of failing the tests they gave us. And then at 18, if we failed all the tests, we would be labelled a failure, just as we're starting out on our adult journey. So that's really good for self-esteem and self-worth, isn't it? So what is learning? The answer, what it is not, is what you had at school. Now, the way I teach, I don't particularly, it's a subtle shift, but I don't actually teach, I enable learning. So I create conditions in my classroom or wherever I am. I create conditions that are conducive to you, the student, learning and enjoying the learning. Because as you know, when you're scrolling through your social media or whatever, if something is interesting, it holds your attention. The moment you lose interest, you lose your attention, and then you go to something else. So it's a fact of life that without attention, there's not really any learning going on. So there's the first portion of the answer. Learning requires the learner to be in a state of attention. So learning is a process, and it's a skill, and it's something that we can practice like any skill: cooking, playing the violin, playing golf. The more you practice, the more skilled you get at it. If you stop practicing, you lose some of your skills, you forget things, and so on. So the kind of learning that I'm about to describe to you is actually a lifelong learning. Just as you breathe and walk and eat every day, if you put learning into your daily life, you'll transform your life. So learning is there's 4 stages to this journey. There's what I call input. That's number 1. Number 2 is intake. Number 3 is output, and number 4 is reflection. So input. Now, there's a distinction between input and intake, but as you can tell from the in bit of both words, something out there is coming into me. Okay, let's just say I'm the student. So input, where do I get input from? Well, there's 3 real ways. There's reading something, listening to something, or observing it. And listening can include watching a video or whatever. So we can listen, we can read, and we can observe. And that is then information coming into our mind. Now, intake is what actually comes into our mind that we process, interpret, discern and understand. That's the intake. So the input, if you talk to me very, very fast for 2 minutes, my intake will be much less than your input, the input that you gave me. So the input is 2 minutes of very fast listening, but I won't be able to understand it all and won't be able to process it all because it's 2 minutes non-stop, too fast. So my intake is the bit that I did get. So input is reading or listening or observing or watching something outside of you, and that will be in real life or in the media, books, media, internet, whatever. Intake is the bit that you understand or discern or digest. Traditional classroom teaching is really only about input. They don't even think about the intake and whether you're understanding it, because most of us spend a lot of our school time daydreaming, not paying attention. So the next thing you have to do, and to increase the quality of the intake, is to have output. So this is the third stage, output. Now, in essence, output is you speaking or writing about what's come into your mind. So output is doing something with the input, doing something with the intake that you derived from the input. So this might be in the classroom, this might be role play, it might be a discussion with your peers about what you've just listened to. And in fact, what I do in my classroom is I offer tasks and questions to guide the discussion after the listening or after the reading. And you might write a paragraph to summarize what you learned or what you heard, but in essence you're producing something related to what you received. So, and then the final stage is reflection. And now you've had your input, you understood what you understood, you applied it to your own life by speaking or writing about it in some way to give a deeper meaning. And at each stage you're understanding more. And then at the end of all of it, now there's a time for reflection, and now we look back at this process of receiving information, processing the information, producing related information, and we see if we enjoyed it, if it was useful, if it was meaningful, what we can do with it, and so on. So the 4 stages, input, intake, output and reflection, in terms of what your mind is doing, we can call that attentive, receptive, productive, reflective. So we pay attention and the reading or the listening stuff comes in. We process it according to various cognitive functions, and that's for another day. And we understand whatever we understand. Now, in a classroom, you may understand one thing and one of your peers may understand something else. But we won't know what you understood and we won't know what your peer understood until you get a chance to compare your understandings, which is the productive stuff, which is the output. So learning that doesn't give you any output opportunity, that learning that doesn't give you any productive opportunities to do something with what you've just listened to or read, is not a full learning. And furthermore, there's no exploration or inquiry involved in it. So there's no point in swallowing an encyclopedia. Okay, you've got all the knowledge inside you and great, but what are you going to do with the knowledge? You know, how do you apply it in a meaningful way to your life? And that is your output. So output is an essential component of the learning process. And if I give you my understanding of what we just listened to and you say, well, no, I heard something else. Now, if we disagree and we in today's culture, we're offended and that's the end of the discussion, the end of the debate, shut down, no more learning. So clearly disagreement is actually useful for learning, but more to the point is that in a supportive environment, that's not going to happen. And now we've all listened to the same video, which is talking about something to do with biology, for example, or epigenetics. And now I, as the teacher, I've created perhaps say 6, 7 discussion questions. So I now give you a handout, or I gave it to you before, and now you've got these questions, and then I put you into little groups, small groups of 3 or 4, maybe a pair, and now you discuss these questions. So the questions ask you about your experiences of the listening, what you thought that, you know, he was saying or what she was saying, and so on. So it's like a guided discovery. But through these questions, you now get the opportunity to express your understanding of the input. And you may have a very insightful understanding, and your peer may have misunderstood things. So when your peer listens to you and they go, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Excellent. Yes, I think you're right. Or it may be in reverse, that you may have misunderstood something but didn't realize you've misunderstood it until you compared your understandings with your peers, and then they were able to help you put yourself correct and put yourself right. So expressing ourselves and being able to articulate ourselves is a huge part of the learning process. Another thing that can happen is that you could understand one thing and I could understand another thing, and neither of us are wrong. It's just that we came into it with different bodies of prior knowledge. You've had your journey in life, which may be living in one town for the whole of your life. I may, and as I've done, I've traveled to dozens of countries and so on. So I'll have my own different perspective. So that's the other thing. So by talking about what we've listened to and what we've read, we make it come alive, and we deepen our own understanding. We can correct our misunderstandings, and we can share our understandings and so on. And then at the end of all of this, then a moment to reflect upon it, either with your peers or on your own later on, with a diary, a learner's log, a journal. You write down what you remember of the learning episode, and now you're looking at the whole learning from another perspective. So, and this perspective is not in real time, it's now looking back at the event, and that's very instructive as well. So look out for my next video, because I'm going to make this come alive and give you an example of what I'm talking about. So just to finish, what were those 4 stages of learning? Can you remember? So it was input, intake, output, reflection, and your mind and brain must be attentive, receptive, productive, and reflective. And in fact, the process of learning goes around in that loop. It doesn't have to be in that order, but that's a good starting point. And it goes round and round and round until the last day of your life. Learning should be the same as breathing, walking, eating, drinking every day. And that's the best protection you can get for your life to enjoy it. Okay, bye for now.